Okay. Welcome everyone to our series Tank Talk series, brought to you by Tank Storage Magazine and Stock Expo. Our third webinar of the series is Improving Diversity and Inclusion within the Tank Storage Sector, brought to you by Dr Ollie Folayan, Chair of the Association for BME Engineers. Folayan has been involved in a number of successful community initiatives through organisations such as Shell and the Royal Academy of Engineers. He is a member of the All Energy Diversity and Inclusion Task Group set up in 2019 by Oil and Gas UK. Please remember to take part in our polls and send any questions you have using the bar on your right-hand side, which we will do our best to answer following the presentation. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. You're welcome to this talk today on diversity and inclusion. My name is Ollie Folayan. I'm a process engineer working in the oil and gas industry. I'm a member of the Oil and Gas UK Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, and I am also the chair of the Scottish arm of AFB UK, which is the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts today. And I'll also like to share a few thoughts as well. If I could ask everyone I'd like to get your thoughts in the chat. If you could describe the last few months, how would you describe it? So I'll just look out. I'll wait for a minute and look out for. I like the first response I've seen there from Yvonne. How would you describe the last few months? It's been a very interesting time. Oh, I like that. I like that. Excellent, excellent. These are all really fantastic thoughts. One of the things that has kind of happened in this time has been that there've been a lot of very interesting campaigns that all seem to be happening in parallel. 2020 has been a very, very unique year. If I could think of a few of these, if I mention a number of hashtags to you, I'm sure you'd recognize them. Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Take Back Control. These are all things that demonstrate that you and I are living in the middle of a social revolution. I believe it was Jill Scott Heron that wrote the poem, "The revolution will not be televised." It says it will be live. I think we've been living in the middle of that. And perhaps he was a bit prophetic when he was thinking of this, because what we've seen is that much of what we've seen actually hasn't been by your usual traditional means. It's happening in a way that is quite unusual, and much of it has been powered by social media. So in the middle of the social revolution that we're in, this is really just a reflection of how the world has changed as a result of social media. We're living in a time where somebody can talk about something in one part of the world, and within seconds, their thoughts are known elsewhere. We're living in a time when we all feel like we know exactly what goes on in the White House, because the President of the United States constantly is tweeting and sharing his thoughts about various things that are going on. And so that's the social revolution that we're in. And it's only, everything that's happened in 2020 is one step in a series of steps that have been going on this year. So if we were to start from what's happening in the last 6 years. In the last 6 years, we had the kidnap of the Chibok girls in Nigeria in 2014. And that sparked a worldwide campaign. And here in Scotland, where I live, we also had the independence referendum. That was followed a few years later by the Brexit campaign. One of the major diversity step changes that have happened is the Me Too campaign that started in 2017. And in 2019, we saw a young autistic girl Greta Thunberg actually start a worldwide movement campaigning for the climate emergency. 2020 has been very, very different and has been it's been unique in many ways, but it's one step in a step of things that have been happening. And that's primarily because of the democratizing influence of social media. Change is inevitable. Now, there is one of the things that this has all been calling out for is a desire for increased empowerment, a desire for increased democracy and equality. And that has been reflected in many of the campaigns that we have seen. Now, why is diversity important? Diversity is important because it is morally the right thing to do. Diversity is important because there are enough studies, many studies carried out by various organizations. McKinsey's has done some of those studies, and various organizations have carried out studies that show that not only is diversity good during normal times, it is particularly important when they're in the middle of a crisis. We need diversity because the current situations that we have just spelt out in this timeline call for unique solutions. They call for innovation. Take the climate emergency. We've been talking about the energy transition and the best way to do that. That needs some of the best minds to come together. That often requires innovation. And very often it is the perspective of people that come from different parts of the world and look at life through very different lenses that give rise to those kinds of innovations. The other reason why diversity is important is because there is something inside of all of us that just calls out for fairness. And you know, this is not just some woke thing or some leftist agenda. It is actually something that is wired into the way that we are built. So there's a professor at Emory University in the United States, in the state of Georgia, that carried out an experiment. And in that experiment, he had 2 monkeys in cages. And he made sure that those monkeys could look at each other, could see each other. And what they did was they initially gave each of these monkeys a slice of cucumber, and they would take the cucumber and they would take the cucumber and they were fine with it. The professor then did something else. Knowing that they could see each other, he decided to give one of the monkeys some grapefruit, but he kept giving the other one a cucumber. And they could see each other, and we know that monkeys love fruit. And so they could see each other, and they kept giving one of them a cucumber and the other a grape. I'd like you to see exactly what happened.
We'll see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber.
You can see the reaction, just because naturally within all of us we have a desire to see things done equally and to see things done fairly, and so this is the reason that all of these campaigns have been taking place. This is the reason that social media has in many ways provided people with a means of being able to get their voices heard and being able to put together a very, very strong coalition of people from different parts of the world who can fight for a cause. And it's because it's something that is innately built within us. These things cry out for change. Now, the interesting thing about change is I often say that there is nothing inevitable about change towards progress. Change is not something that travels by osmosis. Change is not something that trickles down. It's something that must be had through conscious action. So why is change necessary? Change necessary because the stats when we look at the statistics of the way our industries operate, it is very clear that there is a disparity in the experiences of some. One of the things I've done in the last day is I'm going to be giving on Saturday, I'm going to be giving a talk to a number of 9 to 16-year-olds about what a chemical engineer does. And looking at that, I started to look at some of the earliest definition of who a chemical engineer is. And one of those definitions, actually, I found one of those definitions quite intriguing. It was described as, it says, a chemical engineer is a professional man experienced in the design, construction, and operation of plant. That was their definition. It was almost without question. I mean, this was in 1924, so it's maybe not such a surprise, but it also shows that some of the inequalities that are within our industry, some of the underrepresentation of women within our industry, is something that has been built in to the way we operate. And if we are going to do something about that, it's not going to happen just by wishing things away. It's not going to happen just by hoping that things change. It will have to happen by deliberate action. So why is change necessary? It's necessary because, say, in the profession of engineering, for example, women only account for 1 in 8 of all engineers. The interesting thing is that once they actually start the program, there are stats that show very clearly that female engineers perform better than their male counterparts. Yet you've got this underrepresentation. You've also got the underrepresentation of people from BME backgrounds. Engineering UK's 2019 Key Facts report shows that even 6 months after graduation, Black engineering graduates earn £1,300 less than their white counterparts. Actually, the other stat is that on average, your average Black and minority ethnic engineer will wait 6 months longer after their degree before they get into work, regardless of what university they go to, regardless of what degree they come out with. I mean, that was my experience, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission's Right to Work report in 2017 also showed that 1 in 7 disabled graduates with an average age of 26 has never been in paid employment. That is shocking, especially when you consider that in today's world, there are now multiple means in which people can use their abilities, even when they have disabilities. A few years ago, AFB did some work, and what we were doing was we wanted to know exactly what the path of a typical engineer of BME origin would be, and this is a UK experience. We looked at quite a number of reports that were put together by various organizations like the Royal Academy of Engineering, like the University of Warwick, like the UCAS statistics, and they showed something very interesting. It showed that for people from BME backgrounds, the underrepresentation of the people of BAME origin within the industry is something that happens somewhere between university and the graduate stage, because we have almost an overrepresentation of people from BME origin in engineering programs. If you look at university, the university system, 31.5% of all undergrads who are studying engineering today are from a BME background. But when you look at how many of those people are actually in the industry, the number is much lower. So it's about 7.8%. What happens, and what we found, is that what happens is something to do with the types of universities that they go to. When you, for those people who go to the Russell Group higher tariff universities, they had some of the support to make a transition into the engineering profession. But the other percentage of that number that go into study engineering go to some of the other universities and don't always get that support. And it's one of the things that we as an organization have tried to focus on. It is also clear that as you move further and further in the process in people's careers, that the underrepresentation gets even more. So when we talked about 7.8% of the people from BME backgrounds are in the engineering workforce, when you take that a step further, you find that once you start talking about corporate leadership, that number is less than 0.5%. We talk about BME academics, that's less than 1%. And those are some of the stats that drive us in what we do. We've also got the issue that even in scenarios where the systems are automated, there are still significant issues with biases that are embedded into the way the algorithms are set. And so there were many scenarios, for example, in the United States, of representation of where technology was used to try to find who may have committed a crime, while 9 times out of 10, for a person of BME origin, they were picked up as a criminal even when they weren't guilty. You have the scenario where in the UK, there was a survey done by The Independent that showed that if you are a black person applying to university, and this could be for any course at all, you were 21 times more likely, or your application's 21 times more likely to be flagged up for potential misinformation. And we can start to see there why sometimes there is that underrepresentation. There was also another study that was done, and this was done by the Nuffield Centre for Social Investigation, linked with the University of Oxford. They did something that was a similar experience to something that had been done in 2009. This study was actually done in 2019. And what they did was they made up 3,200 applications in response to actual jobs. And what they were trying to do was carry out an experiment to see if those people who were applying would get a callback. And they were measuring the callback rate. They made sure that a good proportion of the people who were applying were from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. And they also had a good proportion who were from a white majority background. They worked on the CVs in such a way that the qualifications were exactly the same. They also tried to control for factors like language or foreign qualifications by ensuring that everyone who was applying, who was a minority, had arrived in Britain by the age of 6 or were born in Britain, so that they were a full product of the system. The results were shocking. They showed that for your average ethnic minority with equal qualifications, they would have to send 60% more applications than people in a majority group. The worst ones were people of Nigerian or Pakistani origin who would have to send 80% more applications in order to be called back. And this was one of the reasons, this is one of the things that drives us. Another interesting thing happened with this project. The GEM project, which was carried out by the Nuffield Centre for Social Investigation, was also actually did similar experiments in a number of other European countries, like Germany, for example. And what it showed is that despite the UK having some of the strongest legislation when it comes to racial discrimination, the actual outcomes from this experiment weren't significantly different between the countries. And it's these kinds of stats that sort of have driven me in everything that I've been doing with the organization that my sister and I set up, AFB UK. So I could show you something. I could show you this is my career story. I graduated from the University of Sheffield in '99, went on straight to do a PhD, and then became a process engineer, senior process engineer, now in a principal position / lead position, and I've also become a fellow. If you were looking at this if you took this as face value, you would assume that I've had a pretty straightforward ride to the point that I'm in today. But the real story of my career lies between each of these bullet points. It took a very long time after my PhD to get into work. And it was quite a long process. And I can remember applying for some jobs. And I used to go over to a library to apply for jobs. And sometimes you'd apply for a job, and before you got home, you got a letter saying, after careful consideration, we've decided not to move you on. And I was thinking, that was 3 hours ago. How careful could you possibly have been? But I eventually got into work. And I can remember my first day at work, meeting with my line manager at the time. And it was really going to be a department of 2 because I was meant to be his understudy. And I remember having a simple conversation with him. He wanted to know a little bit about me, about my family. And I remember the moment I'd told him about something that my father, who was a mechanical engineer, was doing, when I said he'd worked on a project and then gone back to the university to lecture, he responded by saying, oh, well, failed engineers teach. And initially I found it shocking because I thought, who insults a stranger's parents first day they meet them? But what followed, the 3 years that followed, were some of the toughest that I had to go through. Some of the experiences I had eventually triggered some health problems, which I still suffer with today. It was a combination of regular put downs and bullying, so much so that other people could notice what was going on, and that had a real effect on my on my general well-being. And I remember then wondering how much of what I was going through had anything to do with just not being the best match with somebody, or maybe not doing well enough. How much of it could be racial? And I remember wondering what really lied behind the things that I was going through. And there were no overt things that ever happened that you could say that were overtly racist. Did he ever refer to me as something like a black bastard? No, he didn't. That happened when my wife and I were going out to a dinner one evening, and other times. Did he ever suggest that as a person of color, that my intelligence might be any less than any other person? Definitely not blatantly. No, that happened much later in my career when I was working with somebody who suggested that people from people of my race generally intellectually inferior. What happened was a number of very uncomfortable, difficult experiences. But what I noticed is when I spoke to other people who were similar to me, who were from a similar background to me, they could identify with those experiences. These were experiences that were quite recognizable by other people of color. It was one of the reasons why when I came back one day after a really difficult day at work, and my sister spoke to me, who's also an engineer, who spoke to me about something that she was thinking of in terms of a network. And it resonated with me because it was an idea of something similar that I had thought about before. We decided to found AFBE UK. We started with 5 engineers in my small flat in Croydon. And we have since grown into a much bigger organization that tries to support people that had similar experiences. This is a snapshot of some of the things that we've done since then. When we were having a conversation in my kitchen in 2007, we couldn't have imagined that it was going to result in this. But we now have a network that has reached more than 10,000 people with various programs. We've worked with various organizations, and we've also been able to help a lot of people who had the similar struggles that I had getting into the workplace. These are some of the programs that we run. We have a program called Make Engineering Hot, which is aimed at young people. We initially thought about calling it Make Engineering Sexy, but we eventually decided that that may not go down so well in schools. Here in Scotland, we have a similar program called Next Gen. We have the Transition and Real Projects program that is there to reach people trying to get into work. And just a few days ago, we had a great transition program with one of our company members, Spirit Energy, and we were able to help young people. These programs are all free to the end user, and we don't do this. We don't get any money from what we do personally, and these programs are open to all. So our membership is diverse, and the people that benefit from our programs are. Famous writer, and one of the most powerful writers that I remember is a man called Franz Kafka. He's written quite a number of books, Wretched of the Earth, Black Skin, White Masks, and a few other books. But he had this quote, which I thought was quite interesting and is also quite important for us to think about when considering these issues. He said, sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It could create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with the core belief. So with that in mind, how do we ensure that we solve the issue? How do we do exactly what the title of this seminar says? How do we improve diversity and inclusion in our sector? Well, the first thing to realize is that we do not yet live in a meritocracy. Huge progress has been made. Fantastic progress has been made. I turned 46 in a few weeks, and 8 years before I was born, the first race relations laws were put in place. And my life experience is so much easier than it was for my parents' generation. And that's because of the progress that we have made. But we do not yet live in a meritocracy. If you look at what has just been the picture that you've got here, we have various starting points in life, and the moment we actually start to understand the need for improving diversity and inclusion is when we understand this basic fact. And it's then we can start to put in the kind of interventions that can help remedy the issues. So the first thing for all of us to do is to move away from this nothing to see here stance. We don't have a problem. We don't have enough women, but no women apply. Those are all things that are excuses and things that will not help us move forward. We must recognize the facts, the veritable facts. There are numerous studies written by reputable organizations that shows that this is an issue. The second thing we must recognize is that progress is not inevitable. I can remember reading a book by Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time. And my favorite chapter in that book is where he talks about the 3 arrows of time. And he talks about the psychological arrow of time, which is basically the idea that then follows now, or before, then follows before. The thermodynamic arrow of time, which is basically based on the principle that with time, entropy or disorderliness increases, and the cosmological arrow of time, in which he talks about the fact that the universe expands with time. And I think sometimes when we talk about D&I issues, we have a tendency to almost think that there is some magical arrow of time that will get us from where we are to a better future. We certainly do when we talk about race relations. We suggest that things are changing now and the younger generation have no issues at all. But the changes that they will see, the world in which they will grow into, is a world, if they grow into a world that is still unfair and is still unequal, in which they can see, like the one monkey to the other, they can see their colleagues getting grapes when they feel that they've got the perfect ability to be entitled to a similar treatment. If we grow into that world, we will replicate the world that we grow into. So you and I have a duty to put all the changes into the world that we live in to make it a little bit fairer. It's also denoting the fact that there isn't some area of time that points inexorably to a utopia of wokeness. Any changes that we see have to be worked on. The other thing is this: no cause ever succeeds without those people who champion them. This is why we need champions. Every company, every institution, every organization, everywhere in society where there has been change, there have been champions. The reason that we have a world in which apartheid, for example, is looked at or looked on as a thing to be disliked and a thing to be as a thing not to be tolerated, is because there are people. They sat in a prison for 27 years and they were champions. They were champions for a cause. So no change actually happens without champions. And as Theodore Roosevelt said, the credit belongs to the man or woman who is actually in the arena. The other thing to realize is that champions only get so far without their allies. So I used the Nelson Mandela example and I referred to him as a champion. The true allies of that movement were the whole generations of people all over the world for whom that particular issue was their leading cause. It was the young people all over the world who made it their life's goal to see things to see things change, who use their position to speak up about the various injustices that they saw and to speak up about the injustice of apartheid. So we all need to be allies, and there's so many ways of doing that. At this stage, I'm going to remind you all that we have a poll. And one of the questions that one of the things I'd like to ask you as an individual, because the defining quality of an ally is empathy. And one of the ways in which we build empathy is by being in close proximity to people who are from that particular background or different from us. So I'm going to ask you a question. I'd like to see your answers in the chat. And this is not to say that you're wrong or right either way, it's just out of interest. What percentage of your friends, what percentage of your contacts would you say are women, disabled, people from BME origin, people from the LGBTQI community? What percentage, if you were to do a rough calculation, what percentage of your friends would you say come from those particular groups or have those characteristics? So I'll be looking forward to seeing your responses in the chat. What else can we do? What else can we do about diversity? The first thing to remember is that there are no quick fixes. One of the things that we often do, which is a mistake, I think, is we have a tendency to grab a few targets, and we have a tendency to get a few targets, and we say that we want half and half. We want 50% of our leadership to be women by the year 2025, for example. or we want our workforce to have BME representation and we want to take that up to 13%. Or we might decide that we want to employ a certain number. Those are good, but targets are only good insofar as they are part of a strategy. So every company that's represented here, whether you've got huge amounts of HR, whether you've got in your company, you have people who are passionate about this, who are either champions or allies. You need to work with those people to come up with a strategy that ties in diversity and inclusion into your company's mission and goals. And then out of that, you can start to have some targets. The second thing is we must recognize we must start early. There are so many times when we think about diversity and we're thinking about recruitment, but it happens much earlier than recruitment. It's what happens when a young 9-year-old is in school wondering what they're going to do. They come into their school and someone from a nearby company comes in and talks to them about engineering. It's important that when they do, that they see that there are multiple people. There are people from every background, every social class who have become who have come into their own in their profession. I tend to talk about engineering because that's the space that we work in. But representation matters, and if we are going to ensure that the next generation are much stronger, that the next generation are a lot more tolerant, that they are able and equipped to create a world that is fairer, we need to start early. Data is the other important thing. Very often there is a reluctance in various companies to actually be honest about the data, to be honest about things like the gender pay gap or the ethnicity pay gap, to be honest about things like how many people are they recruiting, how many people are being retained within the company, how many of the underrepresented actually make the progression into places of leadership. That is an important, it's important to establish that baseline and to understand it. It's important to tie in with industry-wide surveys that go on, that look at these issues. We need to be able to benchmark progress, and we need to treat diversity as a core competency. What's a competency? A competency are the skills that I show when I'm being interviewed for a job, or when I'm being appraised within my job to see how well I'm doing. If we make diversity, our commitment to diversity, a core competency that on which the people that work in your companies are appraised and assessed, if we do that, we're more likely to have greater involvement in diversity and inclusion. If it's simply stated as a goal or as a core value, if all your diversity and inclusion strategy is a slogan on a rollout banner in your reception of foyer of your company, then it is unlikely that this will have any real impact. But make it a core competency of which people are assessed, knowing fully well that when a company is truly embracing of diversity and inclusion, it is more likely to result in a company that is more resilient through the sort of crises that we're going through just now, likely to be more innovative. There are enough stats that show that. If we can include that as a core competency, we will see the real change that we want to see. In the process, we must also look at the supply chain. So the end client within the supply chain, or the end user, has a great responsibility here of ensuring that when companies come to tender for jobs, that you enshrine into those tender documents the social value of contracts, and you know, there are many aspects to do with that. There is social mobility is a part of that, but also a commitment to diversity and inclusion is greater visibility of role models. The young person, the young boy growing up in some part of, say, Aberdeen would benefit a lot from knowing that someone who is an engineer who has had a similar background to them is now doing well. Is now doing well in their job. They have a response. There is something really powerful when they see someone that looks like them who is doing that, because people eventually become what they see. But there is also something powerful in the young boy seeing more and more women representing those companies and as role models, so that they grow up with a mindset and with the understanding that this is a world in which gender should be no barrier for how well people do. Mentoring is a very important aspect, and if you are a leader of a company, you can use the privilege of your position to actually take somebody from an underrepresented group, whether that be female, whether that be disabled, whether that be BME, and take them under your wing and mentor them. But the other thing, which is also really powerful, is reverse mentoring. And that's where that senior person is mentored by somebody who is younger, and it enables them to see the world through that. One of the main benefits, actually, of reverse mentoring, there's something the Harvard Business Review did recently, showed that one of the main benefits of reverse mentoring is actually that you're more likely to retain the people that work in your company. Mentoring is one thing, but the thing that really shifts the dial as far as getting more women on board, as far as on the executive boards, as far as actually seeing more people from underrepresented backgrounds making it into the profession, the thing that actually shifts the dial is sponsorship. That's when a person who is in a position of privilege within a company takes somebody that obviously they have to believe in and speaks up for them and opens doors for them and enables them to get in, to go as far as their abilities take them. The other thing that I will mention, that it's important that we work directly with the community. So the question I'll ask you is this: your company, wherever it is, there will be a minority community where you live. There will be various avenues, organizations like the Access Network and Powerful Women and other organizations that have taken gender balance and treated that as a core belief. There will be organizations like Business in Disability that look at the situations and the challenges that disabled people face. And you can engage with these organizations, because these organizations often are led by people who come from those communities, who understand the challenges and are able to address them. So I'll just end this with a story, just to I realize the last few slides have been a bit heavy. So I'll just end this with a story about one of the things that really encouraged us as an organization, AFB UK, this year. So AFB UK went out into, for a long time, as part of the Make Engineering Hot campaign, I've been going out into various schools to talk about what we do. And one of the things that we did back in 2012 is we went to a school in Croydon. My sister and a number of engineers, I wasn't there personally, but my sister and a number of engineers went into a school, and they ran this programs that we run, which is just to encourage people to consider engineering as a profession. And from that, there was a young girl, Fauzia, who was inspired enough by the program, and she decided to study civil and structural engineering, and she now works as an engineer for a major consultancy. So fast forward to 2020, we met two young people who had benefited from our transition program, which is a program for university students trying to get into work. And they had been helped by that program to get into jobs. So they worked for WSP and Mott MacDonald, and they were invited to come to volunteer at the Make Engineering Hot training session. And just about the time my sister was explaining to them what the program is about, they both stopped and they said, "Oh, I thought you knew who we were." And my sister was a little bit confused at what are they talking about. It turned out that in the same event that we had back in 2012, both Alex and Noah had been in that event, and they'd been inspired by that event to go in and study engineering. They'd come out with degrees, and they were inspired to, they were given the support that they needed in order to be able to get jobs, and now they were coming there to pay it forward, which was quite an encouraging story for us. And so, yeah, that's all I've got to say. It's been quite hard going, but I hope that the main points that we've tried to share have been understood, and I hope that you've received some help in trying to improve diversity and inclusion in your sector. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ollie. We've got a few questions that have come in now, so I'll just pose those to you. You kind of talked about it then with the transition program, but we've got a question from Ezra, which says, as an about-to-be graduate engineer of BME origin in the UK, looking for valuable industry experience, what would you advise that we, men and women, do in terms of transferable skills and other essentials to get through the door?
Well, the first thing that you need is to have around you an enabling environment. And why I say that is that many of us went into the recruitment process very green, if you like, little experience. And sometimes having a sort of a practice run and having people who can support you through that practice run can actually give you some of the confidence and some of the skills that you need to present yourself in the best way when you're faced with that situation. Now, the other aspect of your question has to do with what do you do in order to be able to basically use your skills or to be able to sell your skills to a potential employer. And I think there are a number of things you can do. The first one is actually similar to my first point, which is find those networks. And, you know, AFB UK is one, but there are others. All of the professional institutions, ICAME, IMECE, SBE, and all of the others actually have, they have within their remit some of these sorts of activities. But find those people who can give you the support that you need. One last thing that would really help is something I call shadow learning. And that's when you find somebody who works in the industry that you want to work in. You have a sort of mentor-mentee relationship with them. But this is not just a sort of motivational aspect. It's actually looking at the technical aspects of the job. And they can give you various tasks that they did when they were starting out. You can learn how to do those tasks. You can get the feedback from them. It will be as though you were being in an office. But what you're doing is you're continuing to increase your skill space. And that will put you in a very strong position when you come to apply for a job.
Thank you. Another question here. We've got, how should we encourage people from a BAME background to apply for jobs within your industry?
Well, I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record to some extent, because again, networking is so important, and being around the types of environments that gets you the information about what companies are hiring, for example. I mean, with the we've had a double whammy here in the northeast of Scotland. That not only has there been a lockdown, there's also been the impact on oil price, and that's meant that there are relatively fewer companies hiring, but there are some. And the best way to find out who those companies are is to link up with the community of multiple communities of engineers, because they then give you information. When you're in that environment, you find out where the jobs are. And the other thing is, for those people who have already tried, I will say keep trying. There is no substitute to persistence.
Amazing. If we don't have a HR team within our company, who should handle the diversity matters?
Well, this kind of takes us back to what I was saying about champions and allies. You may not have an HR department, but you have people who have a passion for diversity, either because their own life experience is such that has made them passionate about it, or they know somebody who has. And you can build your D&I strategy around those people. The important thing here is that the people who most need to be champions, I believe, are the leaders, because leaders in many ways create the culture of the company. And if you have a leader that genuinely sees, and there are many that genuinely see diversity and inclusion as an important thing, that will be reflected in the company. So that's what I would say is find the champions in your workforce, and build a strategy with those people.
Amazing. We've got maybe a final question here from Ramon. How do we promote diversity and inclusion, but avoid creating social and political tensions in our companies through stressing group identity over individual competence and character?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. It's a very important one, because one thing we usually, when we give these presentations, a point that I've been often wanting to stress is that what we are actually looking at here isn't positive discrimination. Now, I'm not saying that there is never a place for deliberately going out to ensure that you have representation across the level, in the hope that that talent then flows naturally, because there are more people who see, say, a woman in a place of leadership, or person from BME origin. But I'm saying that actually the aim shouldn't simply be to get people into positions. It should be to empower the people that work for you, and to ensure that whatever recruitment strategies you have are recruitment strategies that are able to get the balance between competence and diversity. I don't believe those two things are in conflict at all. It's because it's been, I would say, misrepresented in that way, or is because of the sort of knee-jerk response to diversity, which is this place looks very white, so I'm just going to go out there and grab the nearest black person I can find, and I'm going to give them a job. That actually undermines the case for diversity. But there are ways and means, and one of those is actually working with organizations who work in those communities. There are ways and means of ensuring that the people that come through are, and I think I gave the example before. I said they found that the girls who actually go in to study engineering actually end up performing better than the boys. So there is no conflict at all between diversity and competence.
Thanks. And we've just had another one come in, which kind of follows on from that point. These kinds of events, these talks, they are normally joined by people who are minorities or who have felt excluded. How can we bring this awareness of D&I from a company to people who are privileged, or without making them feel defensive?
It takes a lot of work. So it's a really good question that's been asked, and it's the question I usually want to know when there's an event being organized. Is it a case of basically preaching to the choir, or is it are we actually getting this message to the people that need it? So it takes hard work, but again, I would say that it starts from the top in many ways. If the people who lead the companies are people who understand the importance of diversity, that will be reflected in the culture of the company. After the death of the murder of George Floyd, there was one major operator who the CEO spoke out really passionately and really honestly about their thoughts about what was going on. A lot of people applauded that leader. But I was privileged enough to see what the impact of that particular blog was on the culture of the company, because I was involved in an internal conversation within that company in which they were discussing issues of racial injustice. There were maybe 250 people on that call, and it sparked very interesting conversations. What's followed is that they have now come up with some of the strongest measures to ensure diversity that I've seen anywhere. So in many respects, it begins from the top. if leaders take this seriously, if they understand the importance, not just to social justice, not just to corporate social responsibility, but to their bottom line, if they understand that, it then flows down to the rest of the organization.
Well, thank you very much, Ollie. That was an incredibly informative presentation and very well answered questions. I'd like to say thank you for your time and remind everyone that's watching that they can see this on demand by using the link that they used to sign in. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Ollie.
Thank you.